This is going to be a hard class to work with, I'll tell you that right now.
I don't want anybody to give me something I haven't earned, but I'd like the opportunity to earn it.
We were determined to prove that we could do the job.
There weren't a lot of women on the force at that time.
There were no opportunities for women to advance.
He said a woman could not become a lieutenant because you couldn't go to her at a certain time of the month.
We have to be willing to accept the hurt in our history to make that change. The next step is for the LAPD one day to have a female police chief.
Being a Los Angeles police officer is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Every shift, every call, every badge tells a story. And for women in uniform, the challenge is even greater. They've had to push past unfair rules, closed doors, and the long-standing belief that they didn't belong. This is a story about the women behind the badge, those who paved the way, broke barriers, and showed that female officers are far more than silent partners on the sidelines. These brave women are lieutenants, deputy chiefs, captains, bomb squad leads, pilots, detectives, and administrators, constantly redefining what it means to lead, protect, and serve. And it all started at the turn of the century. The Los Angeles Police Department was founded in 1869, at a time when women's roles were confined to being at home. As the city grew, so too did the need for enforcing the law.
During that time period, Los Angeles was growing and expanding, and along with it, the police department started to grow. The police department reflects the attitudes and the changes of the community. And in this particular case, we started having a lot of juvenile delinquents, and there was a need for women on the department of some type. Now, at that time, the only sworn police officers were male. We didn't have any female at the time.
In 1910, Alice Steadman Wells became the city's and the nation's first female police officer with arrest powers. She was handed a telephone call box key, a rule book, a first aid manual, and a badge, number 1.
Police officers could ride the trolley for free, and they did that by showing their identification. And she did show her identification, and at the time, the trolley driver thought that she was misusing her husband's, and he complained to the department. And so they then decided that they needed to give her her very own badge, her policewoman badge.
Officer Wells was limited to patrolling dance halls, skating rinks, and other places where women and children gathered. She had to sew her own uniform, becoming the first police women's uniform in the United States.
I don't even know how women walked around in this kind of heat in Southern California, but it was a long dress all the way down to her feet, and then it covered her arms all the way to her wrists.
Alice Stebbins Wells didn't apply. She had to petition and get 100 people to agree in the city that it was okay for her to work as a police officer. So for her to want to serve that badly and want to be a part of the city and provide a service sets the tone, I think, for where we are now.
Alice was determined to bring more women into the force. By 1912, her efforts had paid off. The department now had 3 policewomen and 3 police matrons, marking the beginning of a new era. She went on to serve for 30 years, leaving a legacy that would shape policing for generations. Georgia Ann Robinson was another pioneer making history. In 1916, she became the LAPD's and the nation's first African-American policewoman. She started as a volunteer, bringing experience from community work with groups like the NAACP. Her first role was as a jail matron, but she soon expanded her duties, working in juvenile and homicide investigations and connecting women and girls to essential social services.
She must have really wanted this position to serve the community. And maybe, I'm not too sure if she really even knew what she was getting herself into. Probably when she signed up, took the exam, got in line, I'm sure many of the men were thinking, now what is she doing here?
Her police career came to an end when she permanently lost her sight after being injured by a prisoner. While we can't know exactly what their days were like, both Robinson and Wells shattered barriers in a profession long dominated by men.
They had no paths, sort of had to figure out what they were doing and how they were going to do it along the way. They had no support from other women because there weren't any other women.
The 1920s gave women the right to vote, but equality was still out of reach. By the 1940s, as the country went to war, women flooded the workforce. Yet the police force remained overwhelmingly male. It took years before policewomen had a uniform of their own, but hand-me-down skirts and heels didn't stop them from serving the community. For decades, many worked as second-class officers, proving their worth despite the restrictions.
Uniform, shirt and skirt and heels, and a leather purse that was about 1.5 inches wide that had a holster inside that held your gun and a smaller holster for your handcuffs. And then you had a dress uniform. It was very much like a Navy uniform. And we also had a hat.
It was very important to be ladylike, to look ladylike, and to act ladylike. And, you know, on top of everything else I was doing, that's just a challenge, you know, to get your hair and your makeup and your clothes and everything done every day.
The city was changing. As civil rights protests and social unrest swept through the 60s and 70s, the LAPD was reckoning with a society demanding change in race, gender, justice, and women pushing for larger roles. Among those women was Margaret York. Known to her colleagues as Peggy, she was a trailblazing detective and a driving force in the Los Angeles Police Department, pushing boundaries by becoming the first female deputy chief in the department's history. She was sworn in as a policewoman in 1968.
We were police women and there were police men, so there were two very distinct ranks, and we trained separately from the men. But we had the same courses: law, policy, procedure, physical training, weapons training, all of the same except for patrol, because women didn't work patrol in those days. And there was quite a bit of training for the men that went into patrol function.
His first assignment was patrol, the basic unit of the police department. Very soon, he had practical experience in many facets of life.
1968 and 1969 saw the largest group of police women hired, and most of that was under Chief Thomas Redden. And in the early 60s, they tried a program putting a couple of women on desks, and it was wildly successful. That morphed into, in the late 60s, let's get more women on the job and put the men in the field.
Retired Detective Gail Carter also joined the LAPD in the mid-1960s and served for nearly 3 decades. She started as a civilian and trained at the academy in a class made up entirely of women. For many, it was double duty, balancing a demanding job with motherhood, knowing the work didn't end when their shift did.
We had to memorize penal code sections. We had to learn law. We had interrogation techniques. We had physical training every day. And our training was only 2 months. Now, the men's training was 5 months, but that's a little misleading because they were in for a month, out for a month. We had running, we had training on the field, push-ups, burpees, how to subdue suspects, and that was every day. And it was hard.
One. You did it wrong.
One.
How about one, sir?
One, sir.
The department in 1972, in May, called the women who were 5'7" and taller together and said, we'll send you back through the academy for 5 months. You can wear your blue uniform. You won't have to wear khakis, and we won't treat you badly. And if you complete your 5 months, then you can go work patrol for 7 months and go back to the job you had when you left. And that will make you eligible to promote.
Gail focused much of her career on criminology.
I worked at the jail like everybody else in that first year. And after I was there for a year, they assigned me to forgery. They had brought a forgery unit over from 77th Division. And I was assigned to work with Robert L. Hagenbaugh. And he was just about my dad's age, and I was a little older than his children's age. And he told me later he didn't know if he could work with a woman. But we worked very well together. I learned a lot from him. And we were going out and making arrests all the time on non-sufficient funds checks, credit card forgery. If you ask partners, they'll say it's like a marriage. You spend a lot of time together. Years later, he told my husband I was the best partner he ever worked with, which made me very happy.
Gail's pretty impressive. She had an outstanding detective career and was good at her craft. These women are proud of the department. They're proud of the work that they did. I feel proud now that I understand it and I've been able to put it kind of in a timeline. I'm proud to be where I'm at as a result of their efforts.
In our class, I'm just proud of the women that I worked with. We had one of the first female captains, Jan Carlson. Helen Kidder went on to become a lieutenant, and Peggy York went on to become a deputy chief.
The first few years that I was a police officer, there were no opportunities for women to advance or, in fact, that was one of the things that we were told very clearly in the academy, that women can only promote to the rank of sergeant and they can only supervise other women. And if you were working partners with a male officer, he would always be in charge.
In January of 1971, a meeting was held in the auditorium at Parker Center, and Chief Davis and his assistant spoke, and they were on the auditorium stage. And the crux of the meeting was why women could not go beyond the level of sergeant, why they couldn't work patrol. And if you couldn't work patrol, you couldn't achieve a higher status on the department. He was questioned about this, and he said a woman could not become a lieutenant because you couldn't go to her at a certain time of the month. That really made me mad, and other women too, of course. And in particular, Fanchon, who was at the meeting. That sparked her and ultimately her lawsuit.
Fanchon Blake refused to sit on the sidelines. In 1973, she filed a lawsuit against the LAPD, alleging sex discrimination in hiring and promotions, a case that would become one of the country's landmark discrimination battles. Her impact went far beyond her own career.
They implemented the new Jacob Career Plan when the ordinance was presented and passed. They did not include us higher than Sergeant 2 or Investigator 2. And this closes us off for the opportunity to take the promotional exam to lieutenant and higher.
Only because you are a female?
That's what I've been told.
She only was able to attain the rank of sergeant, and she wanted to go above lieutenant, and she was told, I believe by the chief of police at the time, that a woman can only go as high as sergeant. And that's what prompted her to file a lawsuit. Plus also be able to work the field and not just resign to desk duty or detective duty.
In asking this last week to be considered for a felony team in forgery, I was refused by my captain on the grounds that I would best be utilized to the department's best interest on the desk in bunco forgery. And I suppose that's where I'm going to have to stay. I'll have no opportunity now for felony investigative team.
The primary reason she filed the lawsuit is so that women can advance higher than the rank of sergeant.
I don't want anybody to give me something I haven't earned, but I'd like the opportunity to earn it.
When you file lawsuits with the city or police department back then, you pretty much ended your career advancement.
My particular position in this program is immaterial now. I'm at the end of my career.
Fanchon's lawsuit led to the Blake consent decree, increasing the number of women sworn officers and minorities represented at LAPD. She left the department before her lawsuit was fully settled.
She suffered till the day she died from that decision of hers. And she basically lost pretty much every friend, openly at least, every friend she had on the LAPD. She immediately had her desk cleaned out, and she was assigned to a little receptionist position in the front of the office.
But her fight created the unisex program in 1973, allowing women to be hired in the field alongside men. The term policewoman, which had been known for 97 years, would now become history. It cost her the job in the end, but she set a precedent that would dramatically change the career path for women in the LAPD for decades to come. In the 1970s, Margaret Peggy York and her partner Helen Kidder became the LAPD's first female homicide detective team, proving women could excel in high-stakes roles.
Helen and I were academy classmates, so we already knew each other. We'd never worked together before. I had spent probably 15, 20 years in detectives, and Helen had worked a lot of specialized detective assignments. It was part of the movement of getting women into jobs that they had not done before.
So there you are. It's a lousy color, it's low priority.
Their success helped inspire the hit TV show Cagney and Lacey, which brought the idea of two women detectives working side by side into millions of living rooms and changed how audiences saw women in law enforcement.
I always would tell people when they asked me about it, Helen was the pretty blonde, I was the one with the kids. Because Helen doesn't have kids and she always looked so beautiful. Helen and I were very proud of the fact that we had the highest homicide clearance rate in the city when we worked as partners. And we were very proud of that. And what that means is that your case was solved. So, we worked very hard to accomplish that, but we were determined to prove that we could do the job.
Another LAPD career groundbreaker was Ann Young. In 2000, she became the first African-American female captain.
I joined in 1981. I worked for 35 years, recently retired from LAPD.
Okay, thank you very much.
There weren't a lot of women on the force at that time. Coming on the heels of a lawsuit, we were new to the men. They didn't know what to do with us. Not all. Some were very supportive, and some you could tell that they were not very supportive of having you as a partner, you as a recruit officer, you as a probation officer. It was tough because I felt in the 80s in Los Angeles was so much going on. It was such a time of a juvenile explosion, gang explosion, narcotics explosion. Then you have women coming on the job. So we're exploding. It was so different. So I think the men on the department at that time had a lot to deal with. Now what are we going to do with these women?
So women back then had two challenges. They had to prove themselves not only to their peers, but in the field. I distinctly remember going to radio calls where people were looking at me and then looking at my female partner, wondering if this person can take care of business.
The first day that I put on my captain's bars, I was so proud. I was all spit shine, new uniform, ready to go. I was excited. I believe he was a detective. He's walking a little bit ahead of me. And he kept turning around looking at me, and I'm looking at him thinking, maybe do I know him? Because I used to work narcotics. Maybe I know him, maybe not. And he's looking, and then all of a sudden, he turns around and he hits the wall. and I believe he may have broken his nose. Want me to get an ambulance? You want me to do something? He ran away from me, scurried up the stairs somewhere. I haven't seen him since.
The majority of the police officers welcomed women, but there's a few that didn't.
A case that my partner and I had, I still remember her name, Amy. We got a call that Amy was being molested by her dad. So we went out to the home. Part of our policy and procedure is that we take the victim into custody and then take them to a hospital to be medically examined. So we went to King Hospital and we presented Amy to a group of nurses. They took Amy down the hall a little bit. My partner and I stayed back. And the nurses are starting to cry. We could hear them. One nurse said that this is the worst case of gonorrhea that they had seen in anyone. I forgot to tell you, Amy was 18 months old.
The Los Angeles Police Department right now is actively searching for Mr. Simpson.
This is AC. I have OJ in the car. Okay, where are you? I'm coming up to find.
In the mid-1990s, retired NFL star O.J. Simpson went on trial for murder in a case that became a media spectacle unlike anything before. At the heart of the investigation was LAPD detective Margaret York, who was married to Judge Lance Ito, who presided over the trial.
It was really hard time. People would go through our trash cans. We had to have private security at our home, actually at our home. There were lots of things that happened during that time that were very difficult. The parts that have been difficult for me is some of the dramatization of the trial and the case that has happened that has said things that are not true. And I know, these things always happen, but the one thing that bothers me the most is the questioning of my integrity. One of the shows said that I lied about knowing Mark Furman. And during the time when my husband thought that he would recuse himself from the trial. And the process is that the presiding judge had another judge interview me and ask me questions about my knowledge of Mark Furman. And of course I knew him, he worked for me, and I was completely honest about that. He was one of the officers in the station, he was not particularly notable one way or another.
Today, the LAPD carries forward the legacy of the women who came before them. What began with a few determined trailblazers has grown into a permanent force, proving that women in policing are not just possible, they are essential to the community.
We're breaking up into 10-hour shifts.
Women now fill roles once closed to them, not just serving in the force, but shaping its future. During pivotal moments like the 1992 Los Angeles riots, also known as the Rodney King riots, women officers played a critical role in advancing community policing and strengthening ties with the city they served.
The officers who really have the tough out there are the ones that are on the line.
Promoted in July 2025, Imada Tingarides became the first African-American woman to hold the position of assistant chief for the LAPD.
I remember having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Captain Ann Young and how it felt to be one of the first female Black captains on the LAPD, and her expressing her joy that I was promoted to deputy chief and to ensure that I remained confident and understood what my mission is. And so I think as we look at history and we look at the history of the LAPD and how far we've come, we now represent the communities that we serve. LA is so diverse. The LAPD is so diverse. It's so important as we listen to the anguish and the pain in the anger that's going on across this country as it relates to law enforcement and what the community is demanding, that we continue to reach out to our communities of color and provide them guidance and encourage them to serve their community, encourage them to want to become police officers and be part of the solution. Growing up in South Los Angeles and seeing what the community became after we moved out was something that really tugged on me. It was only fitting for me to want to come back and serve my community. I wouldn't have had it any other way. I can remember the reasons for joining the LAPD, and it was after the Rodney King incident, after the riots, and I saw the destruction and the anger from the community and the response that the community had towards law enforcement and feeling like they were oppressed and not equal. And that really is what motivated me to become a police officer, was post Rodney King.
We got shots fired back then.
As we look at history and we look at the history of the LAPD, we have to be willing to accept the hurt in our history to make that change.
What began as a single badge became a movement. Across generations, women of the LAPD stepped forward, often unwelcomed, often underestimated, but never unwilling. They protect, they lead, they continue to change the department from the inside out. Today, their legacy lives on in every woman who wears the badge.
I was very confident in why I wanted to become a police officer, why I wanted to be a gang officer. Those were things that I really wanted to experience when I became sworn. And I felt like every day at work, I just was always constantly trying to be proactive and look for work within my unit, and just wanting to soak everything in and learn everything, and just, I might not have been assigned to a certain gang, but I wanted to know who was active in their gang and, who was active in this gang, and I wanted people to know what was going on with mine. And it's just like a huge melting pot of intel in the division within the gang members that reside there. I think when you first go into the gang unit as the only female, probably the men in your unit are thinking oh, is this girl gonna pull weight? Is she just here for the wrong reasons? But once they figure out that you have the same work ethic, you're down to get your hands dirty too, you're not gonna let them fight alone, you're gonna be there with them, you squash any doubt of them thinking that you're there for the wrong reason. And I think I accomplished that. Growing up in Los Angeles, in a gang-infested area, I would see scenarios where gang members would intimidate the public. I know what it's like to live there, so I want to give back to my city and just be a gang officer so I could make it just safer for everyone.
Woven into the fabric of Los Angeles, their courage, pride, and purpose continues to redefine what it means to protect and serve.
There's no career finer than being a Los Angeles police officer, in my opinion. You have your ups, you have your downs, but there's no profession finer, and it's a job that not everyone can do.
We're still not 50%, we're not truly reflective of our communities, but it's still significant in that we have 20%, and we pretty much work nearly every position in the department. It's not segregated like it was back then to women's and children's issues.
I think the next step within this city is for the LAPD one day to have a female police chief.
I'm hoping that women that are coming on now don't have the struggles that women of my generation and tenure had in promoting, that the doors don't have to be kicked open. They're already open. Walk in, get that job, get that promotion. We were kicking doors.